Alrighty. Well, I finished up a game of Go West. This is by Phalanx. It's not my first, I think there was something else by Phalanx I didn't terribly like. I don't remember what. I wasn't thrilled with this. Decent components, you know. The board's kind of pretty, actually. If you look, there's half of it. You can see the rest in my video coverage. Cards. They wear easily. This was a used version, but I'm noticing picking them up off the table, they're kind of peeling as I pick them up, and you're not going to get a lot of plays out of this, and that's okay, because I don't think you'd want to. You know, your standard fare of little wooden Euro pieces. Full color rolls, fairly easy to understand. There isn't a lot of game here. This could be, just because it's light and doesn't have a lot of rules, doesn't mean it's going to be a bad game, though. And I don't think it is a terrible game. It's kind of innovative the way it works, that pushing across the West. The problem with it is, and I think it was kind of interesting to begin with, the end game. It just dragged on and on and on. And there's not a lot else I can say about it. I mean, when you're playing something this light, and you know, it feels almost like a card game where you should be, you know, dealing out a hand and getting through it in a few minutes. It just felt like it was continuously these little picky moves where no one wants to do anything serious because, well, they'll be endangering their position. So there was this horrible stasis that set in. Somewhere, I would say, the last 2/3 of the game, really, there wasn't a lot of movement. Now, there was some exciting movement on the board in terms of, you know, it didn't just stay stuck in terms of the victory point situation. There certainly was option and opportunity to make these big, bold moves. It's not that. It's just that it wasn't worth the amount of effort waiting for those moves to go by. You're just sitting there watching it and watching it and watching it. I ended up rating this about a 4 and then downgrading my Colony rating that I played recently, because I realized this is a game that I will never, ever suggest or particularly want to play. It's not that it's horrible. I've got much, much worse games. I've got worse games that I would play. Things like Art of Siege Tire that I just, you know, I think have miserable problems with them. And there's no problem with this game other than that dragging feeling. It's too light a game to end up in that kind of situation, in my opinion. I don't have a lot more to say about it. You know, it's conceivable. So, I mean, my feeling here is, who's it targeted at? It's targeted at maybe someone like me, but someone who wants a quick, short game. Not a lot of rules, not a lot of effort. Competition, but in a very non-aggressive sort of way. Yeah, you're booting people off and replacing them, but you know, you're just doing it for score, right? You know, you don't have the kind of directed attack. You can go after the leader, there's no question there. You can gang up on the leader, but what it doesn't feel like is the kind of balance of power game that, say, Machiavelli devolves into. And actually, I find that that's an issue with Machiavelli or with Kingmaker, are these other games where the same kind of condition arises, where none of the players want to take the action that will put them at a disadvantage, and almost any action will. And in this, you had this slow trickle as the leading player's trying to get the board into a position where he can't lose anymore, but that's a very slow process, and he has to continually come back and try to set his scoring up so nobody can run ahead for that, while trying to trickle the caravans or the wagons off the board into California. On the other hand, nobody else wants to trigger a victory point phase because there's a cost, an opportunity cost to doing so. You could either be getting tokens as cash or putting an increased score on the board, unless they're going to get a real advantage off of it, right? They don't want to spend their own tokens to trigger a victory point stage that doesn't actually help them. They want to make sure that they get a gain, at least on the leader. So you get this position where the leader's trying to defend his board presence and is actually fairly capable of doing so, even against everybody's efforts. I think that's a shame. I'm not sure that I mean, I'm pretty sure right now, but I don't know if there's any way to fix that. My question, of course, is how did this get published? It's innovative, it's interesting, but seriously, don't the companies look at these and play them a little bit and say, you know, I'm sorry, man. It's just not, you know, it's not going to have the kind of oomph. It may be an interesting topic. You may have started an interesting handling of it, but it's just not worth us sending to the printer. And it seems like this is not the kind of game that would have been undergoing massive playtesting and reworking. So my guess here is that it was targeted at one of these stupid conventions to sell there, and there was a hope it would come out okay, much like some of the other games that do require a lot of reworking. But that it just didn't happen. I mean, the basic idea is simple. And what did they do? Did they call up the designer and say, hey, have you come up with an idea how to fix this yet? Nah, but I'm sure I'll get one. I mean, this is a game that someone probably did not have to spend a lot of work designing. It's a clever idea. They probably fiddled with it. They probably sat down and played with their friends. I can't imagine their friends saying, now, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe in 3 players, it's interesting. But in 4 players, I don't see how it couldn't devolve into the situation that it did. And, you know, if that's the case, well, maybe it shouldn't have been sold as a 4-player game, right? Maybe there should have only been components for 3 and just say, this is really a 3-player game and that's it. And we'll give you rules for 2. And maybe we'll make it a little cheaper just because we're not going to throw in those extra little wooden pieces. But I honestly don't think it's going to be much better in 3. I think you're going to fall into the same sort of situation. I haven't tried it that way. I'm not particularly thrilled to. And there is this real question of, you know, who would have funded this? Because it's a nice production. We're not talking about a cheap-ass game here, right? We're not talking about something that the company didn't have to put a big investment into. They put a big investment into the box and the components and into probably some level of marketing and came out with something that I just don't see fills anyone's need terribly well. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there are great fans of this game and I'm pissing y'all off. But yeah, this is, it really makes me wonder, and it makes me wonder about the company that produced it. Again, this is one of the things that I look at. When I look at a company, if I bought a couple of games by Phalanx, I know that I was very impressed with Age of Napoleon. I think some of the others I was less impressed with. But if this had been the first game that I bought by them, I don't think I'd buy another game of theirs. I mean, not that I'm buying them new anyway, I'm buying them used. But that's a consideration that comes into my mind, is if I look at one game and it's a failure and it's my first look from that company, I'm very reticent towards buying anything else from them. I know that with... I've got these marching through Georgia and Mississippi Fortress from Clash of Arms, earlier Clash of Arms games, and I played something, not one of those, but a different one, I think, of the same series. And I really disliked the map, the way it kind of pooched. Now, I've ended up picking these up because I remember there were aspects of that game that I liked a lot in terms of the maneuvering and stuff, and I wanted to give it another shot. But it left me with the impression that Clash of Arms produces really bad components. And it wasn't until very recently that I see now they're producing some very nice components, actually, at least as far as the map goes. But it's very easy to turn off a gamer when their first experience with a company or one of their few experiences is not terribly good. And as I start, looking at different games put out by particular companies, I more and more will shift away from those companies that have failed me, even just a couple of times in the past, because there's so much out there right now. So much, not just, I'm thinking in the war games field, but in the pure board game field, there's so many different options to go with. And if you're looking at Euros and you buy this from Phalanx, you might be tempted not to buy any other Euros from them, but then also you might be tempted not to make that move into, their kind of, I don't know, Ameritrashy type things like Age of Napoleon that I think is a really, really fantastic game. And I'm left with this, okay, I don't know for sure. They go well on components, but I just don't trust a company that can't make a good decision on games. Now, obviously, you could say, damn, man, some of the companies you love, SPI, Avalon Hill, did that well. Okay, SPI, when I first ran into them, they were running their hot streak as far as I'm concerned. This was just before they went under. And I've found that I'm much, much more tentative about buying any of their older games because I'm not terribly impressed with the stuff from, say, the mid-70s and before. With Avalon Hill, I've learned it's always a crapshoot with that. You might be getting something where the rules are just horrible, but there's a good game under there, or you might be getting something like Class Struggle or Bureaucracy that you just want to say, my God, why did they produce this? How did somebody convince them to put the money up to make a game along these lines? Not that it's unplayable, it's just, where did they think that they had the market for that? And that's where I'm on this. Where did they think they had the market for this? And, honestly, my guess is that a bunch of people bought it and then started buying it at a discount. Probably they didn't lose much money on it, but you don't know what the effect is on your customer, on your customers, potential customers especially, who take a look at something like this and say, wow, and you make two misses like this in a row on someone and they ain't coming back. They're just not. All right.